travel. That our brother, even from thousands of miles away, is able to join us. And all of this at the very end of the world. With an overwhelming surprise, the great storm of persecution is going to come and take everyone. And all means of travel and communication will be controlled, if not shut down. Father, in this probationary time, we want to thank you. We hope and pray, Lord, that Sabbath days like this will continue, if only for a short amount of time left before we're separated, we're isolated from one another. Help us to gather together as often as we're able to, so that we can encourage each other, that we can share our testimonies, our thoughts, our experiences, and most of all, Lord, that we can honour you and worship you in spirit, in truth, in prayer, song, and study. Father, as we begin a new week, we pray that our hopes, our dreams, and our plans are brought into agreement with your will. We know that each of us has individual ideas of where we should go, what we should be doing, but we want to lay these all at your feet. Father, we're coming to the end of another year, and we all have plans for the future. We understand, Lord, that next year will be a significant and important year. Many things will happen that will no doubt take us by surprise. We see that you open your word at a rate that many of us can't even keep up with. We pray, Lord, that you would give us the opportunity and the time, but most importantly, Lord, the inclination and the desire to take time to study your word. We know that each of us has cares and worries, we have financial needs, we have jobs, but we must not allow the cares of life to distract us from the most important and pressing work, which is to develop and understand the relationship with you that we like to say. Help us, Father, and bless us this day, we pray in Jesus' name.
You starting now?
I think so.
Okay.
The early presentations we did this morning, we looked at the reform mind of Christ, and then we just had a review of the material that we looked at, and we
feel it's important for us to become familiar with this template because it helps us to understand in a much clearer way our own history. And when you individually come to more advanced studies, it will help you to see in a clearer way some more difficult passages in Scripture. So we have the first, second and third end of messages. And we've discussed about the empowerment and the arrival of these messages. And we've spoken about the various waymarks that we have on this form line. Time of the end, increase of knowledge, realization, out of the first foundation, the work of the enemy, arrival of the second angel, disappointment, the tarrying time, the empowerment of the second, and the arrival of the third, times of probation. When we discussed the reform line of Christ, you'll remember that Brother Patrick mentioned the two temple cleansings. He mentioned the two temple cleansings. Yes. Each of these reform lines, even though they follow the same pattern, they all have their uniqueness about them. And at least on one level, they all have an overarching principle that you might take hold of and bring that uniqueness into the end of the world, into our own time. So one of the things that we want to bring from the reform line of Christ is this concept of two temple cleansings. And what we will discover, if we have time, but we're not going to go into it now, is that a temple cleansing is nothing more than another symbol or another way of saying the everlasting gospel. So in a temple cleansing, you'll see these same three waymarks, the first, second and third step: sin, righteousness and judgment, fear God, give you glory, the hour is yet to come. Whatever terminology you're going to use, you'd see that a temple cleansing is the same thing as the everlasting gospel. It's just another way of expressing it. So one of the things that we want to understand about the reform line of Christ, which is vital for us to understand and explains an awful lot about the dynamics of what is happening both within the church and in the world itself, is that there is these two steps, or these two temple cleansings. Or another way to express it is that the everlasting gospel is going to occur in two phases. You might express it in another way, that there are two separate groups that are going to be tested, and the first group would be tested, and then following their test, you'd get a second group that would be tested. And you'll see that from the reform line of Christ, that first there was one temple cleansing, and then there was a second temple cleansing. These two temple cleansings are representing the everlasting gospel going to two separate groups at the end of the world. So that's one concept, one idea that we want to understand from the reform line of Christ, besides all the other things that we've discussed. So that's why this idea of the two temple cleansings is a significant symbol in Bible prophecy, because it means a lot to us at the end of the world. It explains a lot of what's happening and why it's happening in a certain way. Over lunch, I was having some discussions, and one of the questions that came up was the issue of public evangelism. Most people who follow this message understand that the Bible teaches that we should not be doing public evangelism during this final reform movement of God's church. And there are very significant and important reasons for that, and one of those insights is connected to this concept of two-temple cleansing. Firstly, cleansing of Adventism is going to occur, followed by the cleansing of the world. And it occurs in these two stages, one after another, back to back, but they don't happen simultaneously. Just as in the line of Christ, you get the first cleansing at the beginning of his ministry, and the second into his ministry. You get these two temple cleansings. In the same way, at the end of the world, we see two temple cleansings, one for the church and one for the world. And without understanding the prophetic significance of these cleansings in the line of Christ, it becomes hard to understand why things are happening in the way that we're suggesting at the end of the world. Very, very hard to see.
For us as Adventists.
Yes, so if you don't see the two temple cleansings in a reformed line of Christ, first of all, it becomes hard to see that there are two cleansings, one for the church and one for the world. Most Adventists understand that judgment must begin first in the house of God, and then by implication the world, but they don't fully grasp or understand the ramifications of what that means. And one of them is that God is guiding and instructing his people, teaching them that we shouldn't be doing public evangelism, because the probationary time for the world is, in this line here, as we've got it, is back over here, while probationary time for the church exists here. So first the church and then the world, this concept of two temple cleanses. And then, at a deeper level, it gets subtly more complicated, because within the church itself, you can see two temple cleansings. And then you can even go a bit deeper, and you can see, even after one group has been cleansed, if you like, you can see another two temple cleansings going one stage further. So this concept, or this idea of two temple cleansings is vital for us to understand. There's a presentation that's been uploaded on the web that addresses this. I think it's about an hour and a 20-minute presentation. And he talks about these two temple cleansings in a bit more depth. If you're interested, you go to the website. It's the midnightcry.co.uk. I think it was done in September this year. You can go through and you can find this presentation that addresses this two temple cleansings. We didn't discuss the reform line of Moses. But Moses' reform line has its own unique fingerprint as well. And what you can pick up from the reform line of Moses, you all know the history of Moses.
Yes.
God's people are where?
They're in Egypt.
They're in Egypt.
Under bondage.
They're not in their own land, but they're in another land. So, when you study the story of Moses, you see that God's people are being judged. He comes back after 40 years as a shepherd, and a test begins to occur upon God. He's brought upon God's people, and by the end of this testing period, you've arrived here, which is the Passover, where they're going to leave Egypt. Yeah? So without going through the whole story of it, you start here at the birth of Moses, and go all the way to the end, and this is the final Passover where they're about to leave Egypt. And this is where you get this close of probation, and God's people have all been judged and they're coming out. So those who pass the judgment successfully, because they put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost, they've all passed that test. Yeah, we're all familiar with that story. And you're also familiar of what happens on that same night to all the firstborn of the Egyptians. So all the firstborn of anybody, whether they were Egyptian or Israelite, if you put blood on the doorpost, you'd be saved. Your firstborn would be saved, and if you didn't, you'd be lost, whether you're a Jew or whether you're Egyptian. So what you can see, a theme or a fingerprint of the reform line of Moses, is that two things are happening simultaneously. and it's judgment. So there's a simultaneous judgment going on. Now if you think about that, what did we just say a moment ago about the 2 temple cleansings? It's teaching first judgment upon the church, followed by judgment upon the world. So they're sequential, one after the other. But now, in the reform line of Moses, you see that they're not coming one after the other sequentially, but they're happening at the same time. They're occurring at the same time. So you can see that in the story of Moses, Egypt is being judged, and God's people are being judged, both at the same time, simultaneously. So in the reform line of Christ, you see it sequentially, and the reform line of Moses, you see it simultaneously. So you don't need to know anything about this message, but you know the story well enough. You can see that, yeah? You can see that Christ has 2 temple cleansings, one after the other, so not at the same time. That's sequential. But in the line of Moses, you can see that Egypt is being judged at the very same time as the church is, and their probation closes at the same time. So, we're not talking about the reform line of Moses, but I just bring that up because if you bring up these various themes, or these fingerprints, or these thoughts, these threads from these various reform lines, it begins to open up a wealth of information that will explain to us what's going on, how we're supposed to respond to what's going on, and most importantly, it opens our eyes to see what's going on. I'll give you an example of that. If we were to see what the symbol of Egypt represents, now this is again a theme that we bring up over and over again, that these stories end up being prophetic symbols. So this real life Egypt, this country, this nation, in that story, is going to end up being a prophetic symbol that we're going to bring to the end of the world, and we're going to say that this symbol represents something at the end of the world. And when we would do that, it would teach us something. Say if you had 2 groups. You had God's people and you had Egypt. And there's various waymarks occurring. Oh, people in Egypt. Your people in Egypt, and the story of Moses tells you, as judgment occurs on Egypt, it's happening at the same time to God's people. So they're both going to start at the same time and end at the same time. And you can line up things that are occurring in that history. Now, at the end of the world, God, who are these people here? They were Jews, they were the nation of Israel at that time. So we would understand this to be the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, this probably isn't a good congregation to ask this question, but what does the church look like? Most people here might be saying, oh, it looks really bad, rotten from head to foot, and in a sorrowful condition. But, if you had perhaps, maybe depending how you look at it, more objective or a less objective way, or you use different parameters to analyse, you'd see that the Church of God, is doing pretty well. Yeah? On most metrics, we're doing pretty well. The numbers are increasing, tide is going up, we're evangelising, many people joining the church. We're on the up and up, really. I mean that seriously.
Shaking hands with the United Nations.
Yeah, we're becoming more and more prominent. We're doing a good work. We've become so prominent. Brother Ben Carson, you know, we're quite prominent. We're so prominent that presidential nominees actually do a special video just for us. Because we're that high up on their radar.
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah? So you may or may not say, and I'm not trying to say this derogatorily, I'm saying it in a positive way. If you look at the church today, there aren't many symbols that things are going wrong.
No.
If you look around and people say, well, what's wrong with the church? You can't pinpoint actually that much.
Physically.
Yeah. You might say there's some drums, but by and large we're doing pretty well. Health is going well, hospitals are pretty functional, our schooling, our education, everything's going pretty good. So if you look about how we're starting from point A to point point B, from here, from the time of the end to the close of probation, you'd be hard pushed, really, to see evidence in the church that things are going wrong. But if you took the reform line of Moses, then you now have the tools to analyse what's going wrong in the church. Because what you can do from the reform line of Moses is do something. You can either say, we'll look at the people, or we'll do what? Look at Egypt.
Yeah.
Because if you look at Egypt, you're going to find out what's happening to God's people. Or if you look at God's people, you're going to find out what's happening to Egypt. Because they're going to give you the same story. Yes? So, all you need to do is figure out at the end of the world who Egypt is. So some people think that Egypt is the world. But one of the things that you begin to learn when you're on this message is that symbols can have different meanings. So when you go to Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45, you see that Egypt represents the world, and the glorious land represents the United States of America. But you can also see from other Bible passages that Egypt can also represent the United States of America. So that's an easy one to deal with. If you look at the United States of America on any metric, are they going up or are they going down?
Down.
It's very easy to see. They're heading to destruction. Yeah? So, if you pick up the reform line of Moses and you track what is happening to the glorious land of Egypt or the United States, it will tell you what's happening to God's people. And it will tell you when it's happening. So when you see a major crunch happening in Egypt, in the United States, you will be able to map that up with a similar crunch that's occurring in God's church, in the SDA church. So that's why the reform line of Moses has an important theme or fingerprint about it, is that you're able to do this. Because on the surface, it's very hard to see anything that's going wrong in the church. But what we do know is prophetically is that the church is headed downhill. It's going down. We know that prophetically, but you can't see it. So the way you would be able to see it is all you need to do is look at the United States and look at the most significant events that have occurred, that are presently occurring, and that are going to occur in the United States, and you would know it will be telling you something about what's happening with this church. So when you get the close of probation at Egypt, right here, it will tell you that God's people having a close of probation. If you see something significant happening, like, for instance, June 2015, when the Constitution in the United States is ignored, essentially torn up and put to one side, and the judiciary begin to make what they think are laws which are essentially illegal, that's a pretty significant event. Whatever the issue of what that law was around may or may not be significant, because there have been 50 countries before the United States that made similar laws, and nobody worried about that. So it's not so much even the law that they're making, although that does have some significance, it's the fact that they're now starting to deal with the Constitution is a really significant waymark. And so that significant event that's happening in Egypt, you should be able to see something significant happening in God's church. And do you?
Yeah.
You do. 2-3 weeks later, you see the same issue, same dynamics occurring. And what's even more significant is the fundamental shift that happened in June 2015 in the United States of America was there was a shift of power. There was a centralization of power from the states to the federal government, or the federation. So it goes from the states to the federal government. 3 weeks later, in our own church, you begin to see the same shift of power from the unions and the divisions to the general conference.
Yes.
So you see the same dynamics happening. So that's the important thing to see about the reform line of Moses, that the cleansing or judgment occurs simultaneously, whilst at the same time, in this reform line, you see it happen sequentially. Correct? Now let's look at the reform line of the Millerites. We're looking at the reform line of the Millerites. This gets a bit more tricky for people to work through without notes, because most people aren't that familiar with Millerite history. But there are some key dates that we're all familiar with. So we're going to keep it relatively simple, because we're only going to be looking at key features, things that most people are familiar with. And if you're not, we'll go a bit slower to work out some of these issues. So in the reform line of the Millerites, it too will have its theme. And the theme that we're going to pick up from the Millerite history is the theme of the 10 virgins.
Yeah.
The theme of the 10 virgins. So we've got a simultaneous judgment, 2 temple cleansings, and the parable of the 10 virgins. They're these 3 themes, and we're going to bring all of these themes into our own history at the end of the world, and they're going to teach us an awful lot. So Moses' one is that the people and the land are judged at the same time. Christ, 2 temple cleansings, and Millerites, the parable of the 10 virgins. So the most fundamental thing about the parable of the 10 virgins is it's a story about what? What is it a story about?
Marriage.
It's a marriage. It's a story about a marriage. And this is a story about a marriage. And when you go to a marriage, where's the first place you go to deal with marriages? In the Bible, I mean. Yeah. Go to church, yeah. Go to Genesis. So, God creates Adam and Eve on the 6th day, and then He rests from all of His work, all of His creative work, on the 7th day, on the Sabbath. See, that is Christian education. When did He marry Adam and Eve? When would they have been married? On the Friday, on the 6th day. So, the first thing we'll be able to think about is the parable of the 10 virgins is dealing with what day? It's dealing with the 6th day. It's dealing with the day of preparation. Yeah? The day of preparation. So that's the whole theme of the Millerite history that we want to try and grapple with. That they're teaching us what's going to happen on the day of preparation. I'll get this one right now. Now, unlike the rest of Christianity, what do we understand the Lord's Day to be? We understand it to be Sabbath, and they say Sunday. So every time we see the day of the Lord, or the Lord's Day, we understand it to be Sabbath, yeah? The 7th day. So you'll find in the Bible, often there's phrases that talk about the day of the Lord. And what most people do not do in their event is they don't connect the day of the Lord, that phrase, with the Lord's Day. We understand the Lord's Day is the Sabbath, 7th day, but we don't seem to connect that the day of the Lord would be referring symbolically or prophetically to the same event. So what you can see is this, that from the Millerite history, the parable of the 10 virgins, or to do with the marriage is going to ground you, or lock you into the 6th day, is that you get this line where it's talking about the 6th and the 7th day. The 6th and the 7th day. This is the parable of the 10 virgins, Millerite history, and this is the Lord's Day, the Sabbath, or the day of the Lord. So we call this the day of the Lord, and we're going to just adjust it slightly to call it the day of the Lord's anger. There's many other phrases we could use, the day of the Lord's wrath, but this day of the Lord's anger is the 7th day, because it's the Lord's day. It's the day that the Lord is doing something. And what precedes this is the parable of the 10 virgins. So we'll put the 10 virgins here. And this is what day? Preparation day, 6th day. So this is preparation day, or the day of the Lord's preparation. This is the day of the Lord's preparation. When does Sabbath kick in? Right here, yeah? This is when Sabbath begins.
Yeah.
We all understand that. And what happens I'm going to give you my, you may not agree with this, push the boundaries out a bit, see what you might think. Someone asked me if we should talk a bit more about reforms, as well as some moral issues about prophetic, so I'm going to try and cater for that now. Okay? Sabbath comes in at 3:50, thereabouts, yesterday.
Yes, it was 3:49.
3:49.
Depending on the costs. Or you
I'll leave it at 3:50 then. 3:50. Okay? We're all good Sabbath keepers here. And so some of us went to work and you negotiated, however you did it, to finish work at 3 p.m. on Friday, on the 6th day.
Yeah.
But you work in Birmingham. It takes you an hour to get to Nottingham. What time are you going to get home? 4 p.m. Now, I'm not going to ask you, I'm going to suggest that on your way home, you didn't guard the edges of the Sabbath and you've broken Sabbath because you haven't prepared properly. You should have actually left work maybe about 3:50 if you're pushing it, get home right, open the door, it's just Sabbath. You should have maybe left yourself a little bit more room. So that's my moral bit for the day. About Sabbath preparation. Can't finish work at 3 and get home 10 minutes late. Driving the car thinking you're free from your labours of the day. But seriously, the point is that if you miss this point here, you're done for. You've broken Sabbath. Okay? And in this time period, you're going to receive the anger of the Lord for doing that. So you've got all of this time here, these 24 hours to prepare. Okay, you've had plenty of warning. You've had plenty of warning. And what we're going to get from the Millerite history is we're going to get a lot of information about this day, the 6th day, and it's going to give us so many intricate details about it that we're going to know whether it's 2:50 or 3 p.m. because you need to know when to leave work. You can't just know this point here that when Sabbath is going to come because you won't know when to get ready for that. You need to, as you get closer to it, you need to understand how close you are. Otherwise, it's going to do what? It'll take you as an overwhelming surprise. And is that how Adventists are supposed to keep Sabbath?
No.
As an overwhelming... We don't. We've got calendars everywhere. We've probably got 2 or 3, and it comes in your... Everywhere we've got calendars to mark this time really accurately. Because we're going to guard the edges of the Sabbath. So why do we think, at the end of the world, when we're taking that dynamic and bringing it into a prophetic setting, that we wouldn't know how to mark off the hours through this 6th day? That's what this message is teaching you. It's teaching you how to mark off time as we approach 3:50, so that you can prepare properly. Because if you're a minute over, you've broken Sabbath. And we know that at the end of the world, everything's to do with breaking Sabbath, isn't it? It's the mark of the beast, it's the 3rd angel. That's why this is the message of the 3rd angel. This is why you have the message of the 3rd angel. It's teaching you all about this history. If I can explain it using this kind of simple logic. Right here, jumping ahead a bit, if this was Millerite history, this would be 1844. This would be 1844 if this was Millerite history. And the 3rd angel has arrived. And what is the 3rd angel talking about? Judgment, Revelation 14, verses 9-11. It's talking about what? Receiving the mark of the beast. Yeah, we should all know that. It's all about the mark of the beast. There was no mark of the beast here.
No.
There was no mark of the beast. This was an imperfect fulfillment of that prophecy. We understand that. So, here you go. Here's his third angel. And he's going to run through history here. And what is this angel, using this symbology here, this kind of bit esoteric, what is this third angel telling you? It's telling you, the sixth day is coming, you need to prepare. Yeah? It's saying, you better prepare for the day of the Lord. Okay? So, just for the sake of argument, we start off at Sunday. Say you know it's Sunday that you're starting off. At the beginning of the week, you're starting off Sunday, and you're going to pop through the days of the week, and then you know you need to get ready on the sixth day. The problem Adventists have had from this point onward is what? It's our watches have broken down. We know that the sixth day is coming. We know Friday is about to hit sometime in the future, but our watches don't work, and we don't know when it's going to come. That is fundamentally the problem that each and every one of us is faced with. We know the day of the Lord is coming. We know that we need to be ready for it on the sixth day, but we don't know when the sixth day is even coming, let alone when it's going to end. So what we need is something to get our clocks to work, our watches, to everything get back into order. And this is Revelation 14. We've already discussed this earlier. This is Revelation 14. And what's going to happen is that at some future time, an angel is going to come down and they're going to get the clocks to work. And when this angel comes down, he's going to come down at precisely the right moment when the sixth day begins. So when he comes down right here, you weren't able to go from Sunday to Thursday. You weren't totally sure. But when he comes down, now you know it's Friday and the sixth day has begun. So this angel here, that we've just marked with this arrow, is coming on right here. This is this angel come down, and this is the start of the sixth day. This is the start of the sixth day. And this angel is the angel of Revelation 18. Now some of us were clever enough to actually figure out on Thursday, a little bit before that, I think we're getting really close to the sixth day. What we're going to mark is that this point here is this. This start here is right here. And this end point here is here. So the time period from the empowerment of the first angel to the third angel is the sixth day. This is the time period of the day of the Lord's preparation. Now that shouldn't throw you, because when we spoke about the reform line of Christ, what did we say happened here? It was the baptism of Christ. And what's the message that's being given? Repent. Why?
The day of the Lord is at hand.
Because the day of the Lord is at hand. This was the day of the Lord's visitation. From here to here is the time period where you need to get ready, if you live in the time period of Christ, to prepare for this judgment, this close of probation. Remember, our history is exactly the same. You're going to see from this point here, this is the time period where everybody's going to start getting ready. And it's not any different for us. But the history of the Millerites gives us this added information about the symbology of the 6th and 7th day, the Lord's preparation, the day of the Lord, from this idea that it's all to do with the backdrop of marriage. So this backdrop of marriage gives us a lot more information than what we've just covered now. That's why back in the summer of this year, you see the issue of marriage being provoked. And someone asked before, in the previous study, when this adultery was going on, this fornication, or this whoredom of the church, they said, where did you fit it on this line? And we said, it's right back here, and it just gets progressively worse. And what is whoredom all about? It's about relationship between a man and a woman. And that is the definition of marriage, isn't it? So, whoredom, or a prostitute being with a man, is a form of marriage. It's a form of fornication, obviously. It's not a legitimate form of marriage. But you see that even that is addressing this issue of marriage. Marriage comes up over and over again in this time period here. So that's what the Middle Right history is going to teach us. It's going to teach us this history. And what we need to do is not just know the start. We need to know as you're going through the day. But the thing is, the way the Lord is engineering things, He's designed it this way, is that it's only going to give you a bit of information as you walk through the day. It's not going to tell you, oh, by the way, it's at 3:50, and you know it's 9 o'clock here, and you can calculate what you need to do. Because what do we all do on Friday? We wait till the end. Everybody waits till the end. Yeah? We wait till the end. Even though we're counselled, we should actually be starting back here. In fact, actually, I don't like saying we should start back here on the first day of the week, really, technically.
Yeah.
But it would be good to start on a Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah?
Okay.
To start on a Thursday, and Thursday's back round here. Thursday's back here. This is Thursday, and this is Friday. And you could start on Thursday, because there's quite a bit of stuff going on. If you've got eyesight to see, you could see some telltale signs that it's about to happen.
Yeah.
So you should be getting ready. But what you're not going to, what God is not going to allow you to do, in the real antitype, the real fulfillment, is what He allows you to do now. He tells you, I'm going to tell you what this time is, so when it's 9 o'clock, you can wait right up to here till 2 minutes before, brush your teeth then,
Prepare. Yeah.
and then you'll be okay. You can wait right to the end instead of doing it when you should be doing it. You can sort stuff out right to the last minute. He's not going to let you do that in the fulfillment of this thing. That's what preparation is supposed to teach us about.
Right.
It's supposed to teach us how to get our lives in order
Right.
on multiple levels. So the way He's going to control that is by only giving you the time period as you get to it. So when you get here, He'll say, oh, it's 12 o'clock, by the way, and you didn't even know it. Well, you could have guessed because it was 9 o'clock here, He told you, but you don't know how you're going through what the time is. So that's what this message is about. You get all of that. We've done it really simply, all from the parable of the 10 virgins.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more to these things than meets the eye. Yes.
On the weekly day of the Lord, we can't buy or sell, and on that typical day of the Lord, the Sunday, we won't be able to buy and sell. So God is showing us even within the details.
Yes, that's nice. I don't know if everybody heard that. Yeah. On the normal Sabbath day, we're not allowed to buy or sell, and during the Sunday law time period, we're not going to be buying or selling there either. We'll be forbidden from buying and selling.
So when we travel long journeys, like 150 miles in the tank will go, we have a vessel that we put the oil in before, so that even when we know we're going out at some point during the Sabbath, we don't have to buy and sell.
Yes.
The preparation.
When I first became the dentist, I wanted to go on a camp meeting. We lived in the Midlands, and it was in Wales at the time. And we knew it was all going to happen during Sabbath because it was in the summer. And the return journey, we couldn't do it on one tank full. And it wasn't in our car, it was in their car. And we were thinking, can we tell them to get a jerry can, or we'll provide a jerry can? They don't think we're foolish. We had all these issues because we didn't want to buy any fuel on the return journey back because we should be fully prepared. We did this right in the middle of our average. And we ended up not going because we thought it was just weird. They've been in the church all their lives, second, third generation or whatever. So yeah, it's supposed to be fully tanked up. And you get that from the parable of the 10 virgins. And another thing we get from the parable of the, from the parable of the 10 virgins, because it's the sixth day, is when you're gathering manna, how much manna do you gather? You gather twice as much on the sixth day.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's not difficult to show or to reason it out that this manna is talking about some kind of outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Because this manna, how does it come down? It rains down. Yeah? However, whatever that literal fulfillment of that was, I don't know exactly how it worked, but the Bible talks about it raining down manna. So you know that in this time period, there's going to be a double outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Whatever that would mean. So, we should be excited by that. So if it's the newspapers of the church saying there's going to be a double outpouring of the Lord's Spirit in this time period, won't you think everybody would get on board? I mean, you think it'd be obvious. And yet, it's so not obvious that everybody's warring against it. So why is everybody warring against this double outpouring of the Holy Spirit? The reason is because there's a false outpouring of the Holy Spirit, which is why the church looks so good today.
Yeah.
It's all a distraction.
That was good.
That double portion is some of it's to remain for the Sabbath, so it can sustain you through the Sabbath, doesn't it?
Amen.
Yeah.
It's to sustain you, that's right.
Yeah. Amen. That was very good, I like that.
Millerite Reform Line. Let's put in some dates. So we've got here 1844.
Yeah.
Does everybody know the month and the date?
It's October the 22nd.
October the 22nd, 1844. For those who I'm not going to deal with it, but for those of you who are semi-familiar or not familiar at all, what we also like to do is actually see what these dates are in evening time. So we know that this is, what feast is this? What festival is this? Day of Atonement. So it happens on the 10th day of the 7th month. So we could put this would be the 10th day of the 7th month. 10th of the 7th. And you'll be surprised how significant these timings are, these things. We'll go right back to the beginning, the time of the end. Now, of all the time of the end, all the reform lines, this is the easiest to see. Because this one is actually a Bible verse. You can actually go into a Bible verse and you can demonstrate and show all of this. And you can really clearly see this in Daniel 11 verse 14. Because at the time of the end, it actually uses, that's where we get this phrase, the time of the end. And you can see so many events that are occurring around this time period. And this is 1798. This is 1798. So the reform line is going to begin in 1798 and go all the way to 1844. So I know 99% of you all know these calculations, so it's probably futile I'll be asking you. If you were to work out the time period that it takes you to get from here to here, how many years this would be? Are you good at maths with this? No? I had 2 to 44. That's what we went to. 46. So this is 46 years.
Yeah.
Why is that important? Why is that important?
46 years to the end, so
Sorry?
It took 46 years to build the literal
So 46 years to build the temple. Sister Jo?
no, I was going to say it's significant in the other 46 thing. There is another 46 somewhere.
There's one.
Right, yeah.
No, I'm just going to mention
Speak louder, my ears.
Christ declares that he's going to raise up the temple in 46 years.
It's also with Moses, of course, 6 days.
46 days?
46 days. days.
Yeah, he was in the temple for 46
Yeah.
days.
So
So there's a discussion in John chapter 2 where Christ is having this dialogue with the leadership. They talk about these 46 years of building this temple. And symbolically, what is the temple? Of God's people, it's the church. So you can see here that this 46 years is symbolic of a building or a construction of a temple. But it's also symbolic not only of a building of a temple, but what else? That you get from John chapter 2. Destroy, it says destroy this temple. There's going to be destruction of the temple. There's a temple that's destroyed and a temple that's built in this time period. So that should teach you something. That this temple begins as a single entity here. And how many groups is this single entity composed of? 2 groups. One group is going to be built going up, and one group is going to be destroyed going down. All started off with one group. There's two groups within that unit, and there's a church that's being built, and there's a church that's being destroyed. There's these 2 groups that you'll see. You see these 2 groups over and over again. There's an increase of knowledge, and this increase of knowledge is an increase of knowledge about what's about to happen. We've already discussed that. And if we were to go to the book of Daniel, which chapter would we go into to address this issue? This increase of knowledge. Daniel 12. Daniel 12. So we go to Daniel 12, verse 4. And it will talk about, let's read the passage. It's quite important for us to understand. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even till the time of the end. Many shall rise to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. The reason why this passage is important is because connected with this verse here, that at the time of the end, there's going to be, or from the time of the end, there's going to be this increase of knowledge. What else does it say in the verse? It says, shut up the words. So there's some kind of words or information that's been sealed or closed that's in the book of Daniel, in the visions that he's seen, and that at this date here, at the time of the end, it's going to be opened up. It's going to be opened up. And you can demonstrate from Daniel 12 and other passages in the book of Daniel that the reason we know it's 1798 is because it deals with the 1260. Everybody's familiar with the 1260. Yeah? There's no particular argument about that. 538, 1798. Although there are increasing elements in the church who actually argue about 538 and whether or not it's true or not. So we can demonstrate that this darkness, the Dark Ages we call it, this mystery of iniquity, occurred in the 1260 time period, 1798, the papacy receives a deadly wound, and then, at the time of the end, 1798, the book of Daniel begins to become unsealed. And if you're familiar with Millerite history, what's their favourite verse? Daniel 8:14. The 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Right here. The sanctuary is going to be cleansed. Sometimes we could tuck in a word there. It says, then shall the sanctuary begin to be cleansed. You can say it's cleansed here, or you can say it begins to be cleansed, because this is when the Day of Atonement begins. So, there's going to be an increase of knowledge. Now, if you go back through Protestant history, there's hundreds, if not thousands of preachers, competent speakers throughout this time period here, even going way back down here, who have read Daniel 8, verse 14, and have some kind of understanding of it. So when it talks about that there's going to be some unsealing that occurs here, that unsealing must be something to do with those verses that nobody else has figured out before. So, primarily what the understanding is, it's not just the issue of day for a year, because lots of people have understood day for a year already for a long time. What do people think about what this increase of knowledge is, or this unsealing of information? Any thoughts? Judgment. So they understand now that this is now the judgment of the end of the world. So they're going to make one application of that. And the other thing about the unsealing is that William Miller, when he did his studies, he went from the beginning of the Bible right to the end and began to connect and join things together. Ellen White calls that the linking or the chain of prophecy. And she says that William Miller received the beginning or the commencement of that chain of truth. So what gets unsealed is not so much the end bits of this information, it's more to do with the beginning bits of the information. And William Miller is absolutely clear what pieces of information he works out. And it's only 3 pieces of information he talks about. Does anybody know what they are? I know people do. It's 3 dates. It's 677, 457, okay, some people aren't sure about that one, it's 508. Yeah. And today, the church is warring against this date and this date. There's these 2 dates that people war against. But that's what gets really, not the only thing that gets unsealed, but this is part of this unsealing. The unsealing is because once you have these dates, it gives you the ability to get to this judgment here. And that's what their message is all about, this increase of knowledge on these prophecies. Then, this message gets formalised. So William Miller, along with many other Bible students, begin to grapple with these truths, understand it, and then here the message gets formalised. William Miller, in the year 1833, has done all of his studying. It's not that he doesn't do any more studying, but he's got all this information in a package that all begins to make sense. And now he's able to share this with people and explain all of these prophecies that are going to take them to this event here. At this moment, he doesn't have all the technical pieces of information with regard to the dates and things, but this is where he's taken everybody. So this is his formalisation of the message in 1833. Does everybody know what happens in 1833 besides this formalisation? Falling of the stars. So the stars fall here. And what is all of this based upon, his whole message? What underpins or undergirds his whole message to make or break? No, his whole message about what you're going to get to here. What's it all based upon? No, back here, yeah. How do you know? All of his message is to deal with time, isn't it? It's all to deal with time. Because everybody knows or has some idea about the things of the sanctuary, but nobody before has been able to calculate accurately the time. So his whole message is about time. And how does he work out time? He has to use the biblical principle. That's it. He's saying 1 day equals 1 year. So his whole message is undergirded on this principle of day for year. In this time period here, that's what he's developing. And he's got Daniel 8:14 to prove and back him up. But there's a problem. Because he hasn't got and enough proof to convince people that this is true. So he needs some help. So here we have the arrival of the first, and here we're going to have the empowerment. What did we say before? That the empowerment is the proof of the arrival. So it's important to see this relationship between the empowerment and the arrival, that this is the proof of this message. So what you need to do is if you've got a message here that's based upon time, using the principle of day for a year, and you're doing some maths calculations to get back here, you'd want to prove that that's correct. How would you prove that that's correct? You go to the second witness, second source, the second verse. So that's what they do. They're going to go to the second portion of Scripture to try and back this up. And so here, this was Daniel, chapter 8, to get to this first angel, and where they're going to go here. So here they're going to go to Revelation chapter 9. So, an associate of William Miller, a little bit before this, begins to study and look at Revelation 9, and he's going to use exactly the same principles that William Miller used to do all the calculations here, using those 3 start dates to get to this end here. And he's going to use the same methodology, and he's going to see what Revelation chapter 9 is all about. And back here, 2 years before, he's going to make a prediction. And back here, William Miller is making the prediction. William Miller is back here saying, I predict, down here, the world is going to end. And everybody's saying, it's crazy. No man knows the day or the hour. Prove it. And he can't prove it. So, Brother Litch, Josiah Litch, comes up in the year 1838, and he's not looking at Daniel, he's not trying to prove this, he's looking at Revelation 9, and he's going to use exactly the same methodology, and he's going to make a prediction. And he says this, I predict in 2 years that this event here is going to occur. That's predicted in Revelation 9. What did you guess? It all comes true. So when this event happens here, as he predicted it, according to Revelation 9, it was all confirmed and proved. And what did he use? He used the same methodology of day for year. So this proved that this was correct. Now what was the most important thing? This proof, or this event, or this event? It's this event. But how do you know this event is correct? Because this one proves it to be correct. This one proves it to be correct. And this is where 9/11 begins to come into this story. Because Revelation chapter 9, we're all familiar with, is dealing with Islam. Now there are many people who, even within Adventism increasingly, who don't believe that that is so. But as a church, right back here, in the history of the Millerites, it was the consensus that Revelation 9 was dealing with the history or the working of Islam. So, this is what Josiah Litch is going to predict. He's going to predict that on August the 11th, in the year 1840, according to Revelation chapter 9, something is going to happen. So let's just turn to that verse. Let's go to Revelation 9. Now, there's a lot of history that's connected, or that's being addressed in Revelation 9. If we go to verse 10, it talks about a time period of 5 months. And they had tails in their scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. So you can see that in verse 10, it says hurt 5 months. And then in verse 15, it says, and the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. So now it talks about another time period, and it says slay. We want to put kill. So first there's a hurting, and then there's a killing. And this one said it was for 5 months, and this one says it's for 1 hour, 1 day, 1 month, and 1 year. Now, most of us know that in the Bible, 1 month is 30 days. So 5 months would be 5 times 30 equals 150 days, which would be 150 years. Now, when you calculate all of this, this would be 1 day, this would be 30 days, and 1 year is 360 days. And if you work out what 1 hour would be, this would actually work out at some kind of, obviously, 1/24 of the day. So if you add all of these up, this works out at 391 days. Yeah, 391 days, which equals 391 years. And this would equal 1/24 of a day. But how much is a day? A day is a year. So you'd have 1/24 of a year, which would be 1/24 of 360, which works out at 15 days. So he worked out that this time period was 150 years, and this time period was 391 years and 15 days. And all he needs to do is work out the start. Yep. So he goes searching through his history books, and he works out the start date of this. And this is the 27th of July, the year 1299. And this is the Battle of Nicomedia. There's a major battle that occurred of this event. Is that not right?
No, it's alright. I had the same as well, Romain. Because you were talking about 390 days and 15 days.
That's what he's talking about, yeah. So he starts back here. This is his start date. And if you check in your history books, this is the Battle of Nicomedia. It's an extremely important battle between Islam and did it mean that? Pagan Rome. Or in this time period, they will be referred to as the Byzantine Empire. Byzantine, Byzantium, however you want to say it. This is the Battle of Nicomedia. It's around the area of Turkey, I believe it is. So there's this major battle that occurs, and now Islam has the ascendancy, and they begin to hurt or torment for 150 years, and then they kill. And if you work out all the dates, this takes you, the end of it takes you to this point here, August 11th, 1840. And what he did was this. He predicted that on this date here, which is at the end, that this warring power, this radical power, was going to be stopped in its tracks and halted. So that's what his prediction was. He predicts it back here, and he does more and more calculations until just a little bit before that, and he finally is brave enough, maybe refines his calculations, that he says, I'm predicting it's going to happen at this date here. And then it happens. And then everybody gets excited. And there's a great impetus to the movement because now this has proven what? This is proven true. And if that is proven true, what does it prove? It proves that this is correct. So, this is why this is so important for you and I to understand. In Millerite history, there's something going on here. And once you see what this event is, and you can see it's happened, it proves. It's not a guess, it's not an assumption, it proves that this is going to happen. It proves it's going to happen. And that's a really important thing for us to understand. So what is his prediction? What is the end result of all of this? What does he say is going to happen? He says this. On August 11th, 1840, radical Islam is restrained. He predicted that radical Islam was going to be restrained, and when it did get restrained, it proved that what they're predicting that's going to occur here is actually going to happen. And that's really significant for us to deal with. Why? Because everybody in the world knows that what's going on right now, for the last decade plus, is that radical Islam is beginning to exercise its power and its strength in opposition to the nations of the world. This is not the states of Islam, these are not Islamic countries. This is a system of radicalism which is not connected to the nation states of Islam. There's this struggle, this warfare between radicalized Islam and not just the West, but most of the world. So this is what his prediction was, and it all came true. So before we move on, here you have an assumption. Here you have the proof. And what is this an assumption of? This event here. This is an assumption or a guess, however way you want to say it, however weak you want to make that argument, that here you're saying something's going to happen. This proves it to be so. So if we were to bring this to the end of the world, and we're saying this is the Sunday law in the United States of America, most Adventist believers are going to be a Sunday law in the United States of America. But they're putting it right out here, high in the sky, by and by. You know, right out there. Nobody knows. But if someone back here said, we think it's going to happen pretty soon, people would say, how would you know? How would you know that this assumption is correct? Based upon what we've just looked at now, how would you know? Because you'd go back to here and say, this is going to prove that what I'm saying is correct. This is the proof that my assumption that there's going to be a Sunday law imminently is correct. There's the assumption, this is the proof of this. There's complexities to addressing this issue, but let's go back just to Daniel 11 verse 40. In Daniel 11 verse 40, I just paraphrase it, I didn't read it earlier. It says, at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. I know it's not applicable to people in this congregation, but there may be people who are listening. If you're one of the people who read verse 41 and bring into this verse three entities, or three people, or three nations, three powers, according to Uriah Smith's understanding, I'm suggesting that that is a wrong understanding of this verse. It's a wrong understanding of this verse. And the way you know it's wrong is because if you go back into Smith's work and go back to verse 36, he clearly tells you that when the King James it says, and the king, he changes that word the to a. And he says something like this: if it could be shown that we could change the into an a, everything would be okay, as I'm going to explain it. And then he goes to a Hebrew scholar to justify his position of changing the to an a. But you have to really do some linguistic gymnastics to do that. You type, if you go back into the Hebrew and you see this term, the king, or just the word the, and you run it through the book of Daniel, even in the English, over and over again, if it's the, it really is the. It's a definite article. He's speaking about something specific. But what he needs to do, he needs to bring this king in verse 36 as a brand new person on the scene. A brand new person on the scene. But he's wrong in doing that. Anyway, going back to verse 40. So in verse 40 it says, at the time of the end, the king of the south is going to come against him. That him is the king that we just read about, which is the king of the north. So right back here, you have the king of the south coming against the king of the north. We don't have the time to go through this, but you can show quite relatively simply this king of the south is the warfare between France and the papacy. In 1798, when France, who is symbolically represented as the king of the south, comes and delivers a deadly wound to the king of the north. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But the verse then says, so for those of you taking notes who want to ask questions to people who either war against this message or have a message that sounds similar to this message, is ask them this question. Ask them this question, because what I'm saying is this. The verse clearly says, and at the time of the end, two things are going to happen. At the time of the end, two things are going to happen. And they're going to happen in a very specific way. At the time of the end, the king of the south is going to come against the king of the north. And also, the king of the north is going to come against the king of the south. Now, for my brethren who try to address this issue, let me say this. What they will try to do is this. They'll make the time of the end a period of time. Is that wrong?
Yes.
It's not wrong. But we want to make the time of the end a point in time. Is that wrong? No. So it's got a period and a point, which is, if you know what that means, it's kind of like quite interesting. What we do not teach is this. At the beginning of the time of the end, right here, number one happens. Sometime along the time of the end, number two happens. That's what most people are going to teach, and I'm saying that is not correct. Prophetically speaking. Historically speaking, of course that's what happens. First this one and then this one at a later date. But prophetically it's not the case. And that's where we begin to part ways with most people who understand prophecy. Is because they do not see these reform lines in the same way that we do. So we teach we're teaching this very, very clearly, that this is the time of the end where number one occurs. The king of the south comes against the king of the north. And prophetically, number two isn't here, but is actually directly underneath it. Which would make it look like this. That you have two simultaneous events at the time of the end, because they're dealing with two separate prophetic histories. We're so unconditioned from reading scripture at a prophetic level, even though we claim to believe the proof texting method, that we get locked into this historical methodology. And yet most of the people who fight against the conference and the pastors and the seminaries say that they refuse outrightly to use the historical critical method, and yet they've fallen into that very trap. My brother read to you earlier about this higher education, and it says the songs and the language. This is higher education, the mystery of iniquity. That higher education is using these techniques, which are Catholic techniques of interrogating the Bible, which were developed in the Counter-Reformation time period. And we call it today the historical critical method. And most people who even claim to fight against that are using the same technique to develop their arguments. Because they'll use that methodology, the historical methodology, to place number one and number two sequentially. Because they don't see that the proof texting method sends them in a different direction.
So because it's the same, why you put them at the same points is because they're both coming with the same event. So you push me, I push you back, kind of thing. I know I don't want to make it sound too simple, but I'm just trying to get my head around why they're actually at the same point rather than one after the other. So,
and the reason for that is because a careful analysis of reform lines takes you from a beginning to an end. And those reform lines occur in different stories, in different times of Earth's history, and they lay one on top of the other. You don't have reform lines doing this. You have them doing this. They all go one underneath the other. And it's this lack of clarity that is causing this problem, where people use the historical method instead of the prophetic method. And it's a really difficult thing to get your head around initially, because we're so unfamiliar with using the prophetic methodology that we're supposed to use, as opposed to using this historical method, this sequential method. It really is a paradigm shift, and once you see it, things begin to really make sense, and things really start to fit in. But until you do, you're going to be warring against this message for a long time. And it all starts here, right in this verse.
so if you use the method that the wider church uses, or other scholars use, then you have to put two at some point on that timeline. Is that what you're saying? It would really...
Yeah, it'd be out here somewhere, obviously, because of the scale we're at. But if this was the scale we're at, if this was here, and this was here, number two is out here.
Throw everything out, all the...
And then it begins to break down and not make sense. And even though you might say that you might get the event correct, you're still going to be thrown out because you're not able to get this history and put it underneath this history. It's what makes the difference between what we're saying and what everybody else is saying, even though it all sounds the same. And what's confusing is, what I'll do is, let me just put in the dates here. We know that this is 1798. France comes against the papacy. The papacy comes against the king of the south here, because at the end of the world, this is the USSR. This is still the papacy, and this is 1989. So 1989 and 1798 are parallel events that look like this. Even though historically, obviously 1989 comes after 1798. Historically, it's correct, but basically this should be placed underneath. Yes. Right.
Sister White also said that the first and the second agency of God, they talk about parallel to that one as well.
Yes. Yes, there's many spiritual prophecy passages to back all of this information up.
So hence why we say 40A and 40B.
That's why we get these verses and break it down into two parts, part A and part B. Because they're both happening at the time of the end. There's one time of the end, one for this history, and one for this history. They're both time of the end. So, 1989, the papacy begins to do an attack upon the USSR. It brings down the USSR. And we see this in verse 40. If you read the verses, it says in verse 40, he brings down the king of the south. In verse 41, what does it say in verse 41? He shall enter also into the glorious land. And in verse 41, it talks about bringing down the second power. And then in verse 42, it says he shall stretch forth his hand, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. And if you read the following verses, it just goes into slightly more detail. So how many powers is the king of the north bringing down in these verses? King of the south, the glorious land, and Egypt. 3 powers. So, when you see that the papacy in verse 40 is beginning to bring down the first power of Bible prophecy, because it's going to be sitting on the throne of the world by the time you get to verse 45, by the time you get to the end of this history, when you tie that up with other passages in the book of Revelation, it's not overly clear to see that in these last 6 verses, although you can see it. What it's teaching us is this: when you see this event here, you know that this is the first event that comes. But once the first event comes, you should be expected to see the second and the third happening pretty soon afterwards. But how do you know this is correct? You don't know it's correct. You don't know because you've only got my word for saying that all of this is correct. When you say historical sources, you could go to like Time magazine and you could know all of that, but if that was also correct, how would you know that it's fact? We know it's fact that papacy brings down the USSR in 1980. Everybody knows that, but what does it mean? That's the thing. I'm saying what it means is this, that now the papacy is on the rise, and he's going to bring down the world rapidly. He's going to do it in 3 steps. And how do we know that? Because this is an assumption. The way you know it is you have to go to here, which is what? The proof that this is correct. So, what you need to do is run through time and see when this proof occurred. And in the story of, or the history of the Millerites, what was their proof? What proved that Miller was correct? The restraint of radical Islam. That's what proved that what he was teaching was correct. So what we would need to see today is, has there been a time where radical Islam was restrained? It was causing problems for the world and now has been restrained. And the answer is yes. Because at 9/11, after the attack upon the Twin Towers by radical Islam, all the world basically went to war against radical Islam and clamped them down and restrained them. And they've been restrained since that time period. They're trying to push and escape out of this virtual prison cell that they're in. And they're trying to push the boundaries, but they've been contained and restrained pretty well, considering the damage that they could do and did do. So you know that at 9/11, the restraining of radical Islam was a proof that we're in the final movements. The other way it says that the final movements are rapid ones.
And that history.
And also, in this story here, in the Millerite history, we saw that it was all based upon a day equals a year. This was the principle that they're using. But the principle that we're using is history repeats. And all that you've learned today is that all we've been speaking about is how history is repeated, how the reform line of Christ is repeated, how Millerite history is repeated, and we haven't even gone through all the technical details about the Millerite history. But what we've seen is this. There's an assumption that history is repeating here, therefore prophesying that this event is just about to happen. When you get two testimonies, the two histories now have been repeated, which were 1798 and 1840, which were repeated in 1989 and at 9/11 to year 2001, you have two testimonies now that the methodology that we're using of history repeating is indeed correct, and that this restraint of radical Islam at 9/11 is the proof that the National Sunday Law in the United States is about to happen, because this is number 2. This is Daniel 11, verse 41.
9/11, prior to 9/11, you know, the Millerites 2 years before decided to actually predict something was going to happen. Was there any prediction that radical Islam was going to be restrained based upon what happened with the Millerites? Is there a prediction by anyone of this business?
The reason why it becomes more complex is because this line here of the Millerites, this is 9/11, yeah?
Yeah.
But this is also 9/11.
Yes, it is.
This is also 9/11. And the prediction can also occur in this time period. So the complexity is that this prediction was pre-9/11, and you can see that when you run through this history, it gets quite, this is some advanced truth now, but you can show that the actual prediction occurs in this history, which is a post-9/11 history. So there is going to be a prediction, but it's not going to be pre-9/11, it's actually post-9/11. And the reason you get that is because we're using the same idea of repeating history. We're seeing how these histories repeat, and we're doing it in this time period here. So we're now in 2015, so 2014, and we're seeing how history is repeated, and we're going to be making a prediction.
The thing is, Josiah was specific in what he predicted based on, of course, he was using the day-by-year principle. Are we going to be specific on what we predict? Because
Yes.
he was actually able to say, on this day, this is going to happen. So, of course, we're using events, so we can say, this is going to happen.
But we're not going to know.
I'm not saying that at all. I said he was using that. But are we going to, based on events that we're seeing, say, this is
We're going to be based upon events that have already occurred
yeah.
back in history.
Okay.
We're going to have some kind of understanding of those events, see what implication they have in our history today, and then make a prediction based upon that. It's not really...
Because I'm looking at the Millerite timeline, and in our time, the events that have happened on their time, August 11, 9/11's happened already. So what's really there in between that time and the next event for us to say, okay, this thing is coming, this thing is cut. I don't know if you know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to put it as eloquently as possible, but it's not coming out that way. So 9/11's already happened. That lines up with August 11, 1840.
Let me try and explain why this is not an easy question, as you might think it is. Give me 2 minutes. Let me just address another issue with my sister. We've spoken here about radical Islam, Revelation chapter 9, and I gave you 2 dates, so 2 time periods, 150 years and 391 years. Remember that? Yeah? If you go back into Revelation 9, it talks about, let's go back into Revelation chapter 8. Revelation chapter 8 is connected with Revelation chapter 9. Verse 13. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. So if we just go back to verse 5, chapter 8, verse 5, it says, And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices of thunder and lightnings and an earthquake. And the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. So Revelation 8 talks about seven angels with trumpets, and they're going to sound. And if you read Revelation chapter 8, it deals with four of those angels who have trumpets. So it says, one of the angels blows his trumpets and something happens, then the second, then the third, then the fourth. By the time you get to the end of the chapter, it says, Woe, 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 because there's three more angels who are going to blow their trumpets. So, this is standard Millerite pioneer teaching. This is well documented, well understood. In Revelation chapter 8, it talks about four trumpets, and then in Revelation chapters 9 to 11, 9 to 11, it talks about the next three, and there you get your seven trumpets. Yeah? So this T stands for trumpets. These trumpets are actually nations. They're real life nations who come and make war against the nations of this earth. So there's one nation fighting against another nation. And what these trumpets represent, these trumpets equals a power that's sent by God, and I was going to put a bad or evil or something, but I'll just leave it as power. They're not necessarily good people, they don't have to be good, but they're a power sent by God to punish Rome. So Rome's doing something bad, and these powers are going to set to punish it. And it's for a very specific reason. To punish Rome for making Sunday laws. So, Revelation chapter 8, we know that Rome is divided into pagan Rome and papal Rome. Revelation 8 is dealing with pagan Rome, and Revelation 9 is dealing with papal Rome. So this is the papacy and this is pagan Rome. These four trumpets here of powers or countries or nations that are sent to punish pagan Rome, because pagan Rome made a Sunday law. Some people don't know that, and that happened in the year 321 AD. The year 321 AD, Constantine made a Sunday law. When he made the Sunday law, and in 4 Sundays, God said, that's enough, you've gone over the line, you've tolerate all this, anymore, I'm going to start punishing you. So over the next 200 years-ish, he punished and punished pagan Rome, pounded it into the ground with these 4 trumpet powers. These were the Huns, the Ostrogoths, and the Heruli, and the Vandals, these 4 powers. So they came to punish them. Once they come off the scene, you get 538. 538, the first thing the papacy does, when it begins to rule the world supremely, is do what? Make a Sunday law. That should teach you something. Pagan Rome makes a Sunday law towards the end of its ruling, its rulership. When it's just going down the tubes, it begins to make a Sunday law, and the papacy makes one right at the beginning. So that teaches something about the end of the world. The United States is going to make a Sunday law in the United States just as it's going down, and the papacy is going to make a Sunday law just when it's starting. So you can learn lots of things just about those 2 Sunday laws. When the papacy makes a Sunday law in 538 AD, what's God going to do? He's going to send trumpets to punish it. It's got 3 trumpets left. It's going to send 2 trumpets to punish it. But these trumpets are called also woes. It says woe, woe, woe. So there's 3 woes are connected to the last 3 trumpets. And these, because all the trumpets, the last 3 all got a woe connected to them, they're all identical. Because it's the same symbol. And these 3 trumpets are Islam. Rome comes up 3 times. Pagan Rome, Papal Rome, that gets a deadly wound in 1798. That deadly wound is going to be resurrected at the end of the world according to Revelation 13. And then the papacy is going to come back. We often call that modern Rome. So you had 4 trumpets for pagan Rome. You had 2 trumpets for the papacy. And there's 1 left over. 1 more trumpet left over. And that 1 trumpet, the 7th last trumpet, is for modern Rome. And our contention is this. The 5th trumpet is a woe, is Islam. The 6th trumpet is a woe, is Islam. And upon the testimony of 2, the thing is established. So the 7th trumpet, we know is a woe, would also be Islam. And the history here of August 11th, 1840 was the end of this part of the 6th trumpet, the woe. It was the restraining of this 2nd woe that marked at 1840. And what would you expect happening at the end of the world? That there's a woe trumpet that's coming up, which is Islam, which also gets restrained here at 9/11. The story's a bit more complex than I'm making it appear. But what I'm showing is that the connection between 1798 and 1989, and the connection between 1840 and 9/11, interlaced into these 2 time prophecies and the connection between them, is this whole story of Revelation 8, then 9 to 11, which is dealing with these trumpet powers. These trumpet powers are powers that are sent to punish Rome for making Sunday laws, and the 5th trumpet hurts, the 6th trumpet kills. When it's restrained on August 11th, 1840, it marks the restraining of the 7th trumpet, or the woe part of it, which is again radical Islam at 9/11. There are subtleties to all of this information, but that's the connection between 9/11 and Revelation 9, and that's why we contend, which is in opposition to almost all of Adventism, is this: that Islam is not some kind of tool in the pocket of the papacy. Wherever you want to talk about conspiracy theories about bankrolling them, or where they get their money, or how they were created, and many people have all of these theories, and they can show PowerPoint presentations and all manner of things. Prophecy is really, really clear that Islam, along with the other 4 trumpets that preceded it, were enemies of Rome. They were the enemies of Rome. And in this history here, in the 5th and 6th trumpet, this history here, when they're doing all this warfare and attacking, they're attacking the armies of Rome. They're attacking the powers that defend Rome. That's why they're after Constantinople, Spain. And at the end of the world, who is radical Islam after? The United States. Because the United States have fallen into an alliance with the papacy at the end of the world, and they've become their defenders, or their army. So, we didn't even get started properly, and we didn't finish the reform life of the middle way. But I hope we can see some of the reasoning why 9/11 is such an important issue in Bible prophecy, and why, again, in opposition to most conservative Adventist speakers, our eye is not on the movements of the papacy and what it's doing, it's upon the work of radical Islam, plus a correct understanding of the threefold union of Revelation 16 and Revelation 17. Because without that, you can't see what's going on in history. Most of those people who are tracking the events or the workings of the papacy are looking in the wrong places, because what they need to see is the work of the United Nations and the work of the United States of America and the work of Islam that's bringing this world to its knees. And not only bringing the world to its knees, it's actually forming the one world government. It's not Catholicism that's doing that, it's Islam that's doing that. And even that can be demonstrated in Scripture. So in closing, let's just read one verse that hopefully might show that. That I'm suggesting this, that the papacy is not bringing to fulfillment the one world government that's spoken about in Revelation 16 and 17. It's actually Islam. And you can see that in Genesis chapter 16, verse 12. Genesis chapter 16, verse 12. This is talking about Ishmael. It says in the verse, and he will be a wild man. Is that King James if you have the, by the way? Yeah. When it says wild man, if you go check what the Hebrew says, guess what that word wild is? It's actually an untrained wild donkey. The actual definition of the word. If you look in any Reformed Bible, it says he'll be a wild ass of a man. Or wild donkey, yeah, depending on which version it is. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. So you see that every man's hand is going to come together and be against this power here. We'll find two more verses. Let's go to Luke. Who knows which passage I'm looking for? So I do Matthew or Luke. Matthew 24, Luke 21. Right? 21, 25. It is 21, 25.
What's that, Luke?
Luke 21, 25. I just read the first part, so it can't be that one. Luke 21, 25. And there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and in the stars. So this stars here is 1833. And upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. This distress of nations that's marked here in Luke 21 is actually this event here. This distress of nations, there was a distress of the European nations about what was happening with radical Islam in Millerite history. And this verse here, verse 25, is a direct reference to this verse here. And there's a parallel verse. If you go to Revelation chapter 11, it tells you the end time fulfillment of exactly the same passage. So we've read in Genesis 16:12 that every man's hand is going to be against Ishmael, who is the father of Islam, basically. And that's what happened here. Every man's hand was against him. The European nations came against radical Islam and restrained them. And 9/11, exactly the same thing happened. The whole world, the United Nations, the forming and the lights coming together. In Luke 21:25, it was the distress of nations, but in Revelation 11, verse 18, it says, and the nations were angry. The wrath is come, and the time of the dead that they shall be judged. So just picking up the first phrase here, it says the nations were angry. This angering of the nations is this work of radical Islam at the end of the world, where it begins to make the nations angry, and they're going to start making moves to restrain this, but they can't do it as a singular nation. The whole world has to come together, spearheaded obviously by the armies of Rome, and it's this struggle, this life and death struggle between these trumpet powers and the armies of Rome, who are going to bring the whole world together, that is going to cause this one world government. And the papacy is going to take full advantage of all of this situation and use all of this struggle that's going on for its own ends, not for any of these political ends. So that's why we understand that where our focus is on the work of Islam, the work of the United Nations, and the work of the United States. Because whatever the papacy is doing, it's doing right in the background in darkness. And I'm not trying to say that the significant event that just happened this past September didn't have any significance. They're just being more and more open about the alliance and the agreement that's going on between the United States and the papacy. That's so obvious to see. But way back here, this is 1989, way back here, about the year 1984, America, speaking about marriage, America and the papacy got married. They consummated their marriage in 1989, and this was her 9-month pregnancy, and she began to give birth here. 9/11. This is the birth pains that's going to bring out this event here. Because Spirit Prophecy says that Sunday is what? The child of the papacy. The child of the papacy is going to be born here, and these are the birth pains from 9/11 to the Sunday law that are occurring after their marriage, right back here in 84. So this is a bit of a point of history about what 9/11 is, why it's so important, and some of the reasons why we frankly just don't agree with many of the conclusions that both liberal and conservative Adventism is coming to. Because everything we're building upon is how history repeats. We're using inspired comments and statements of just plain normal history, no conspiracy theories.
I think I remember in 1984 where you're saying the USA and papacy got married. I'm sure that's when some terrorist activity started to take place in 1984. TWA, there were quite a few things going on, weren't there?
Yeah.
I remember. Okay.
I've gone over time. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and loving kindness towards us. We ask and pray that you would be with us. May the thoughts, ideas and sentiments that have been expressed, we pray that there be an agreement in accordance with your will. If I've said or done anything wrong, I ask that you would forgive me. Lord, we contemplate the great reformatory movement that has already started over 25 years ago, Father. We want to ask that you would be with us, that you would shield us and protect us, for we know that great movements are already happening on turn. Help us to have clarity on these things, and may we read your word with faith and not doubt. There are so many facts in this prophecy, Lord, that are staring us in the face, but we're so unwilling to accept them, because very few men are willing to accept them. And we're so inclined to look to man for confirmation of what is correct and what is not. Father, be with us, help each of us to stand upon your word. We know that soon we will have to do that individually.